And so we have arrived at Advent, one of the most observed, celebrated, and in a sense overlooked observances of our Christian calendar. Overlooked, I say, because of the sheer magnitude and depth of the occasion is at times overshadowed by our culture's obsession with the more superficial aspects of it. Our particular culture tends to focus on a baby, and we are rightly captivated by the recurring drama of the nativity story. Ancient Christians and many Christians today focus on the second advent in the future, and all of these are right and good things to think about. But in this focus on past or future events, we can miss sometimes the living experience of what Advent offers, and that is a recognition of the miracle of God being born into our lives on an ongoing basis in the here and now. Technically, Advent is a period where we await an arrival of someone or something. This morning I want to call this period of expectancy, of listening, of watching and waiting a kind of threshold. And our tradition is rich in imagery and stories of hurting people, waiting for, trusting in, and then experiencing the love and presence of God. Individuals and communities experiencing a kind of breakdown, who are then called to the threshold of faith, trusting that God will keep God's promises of salvation for his beloved children, and so find healing and a kind of new birth of life. Salvation. Isaiah's poem this morning describes just such a moment. It looks beyond the present distress of the Jerusalem of Isaiah's time and encourages its people to see Jerusalem and their own future possibilities through the eyes of God's faith in them. In Isaiah's generous vision of salvation offered to a ravaged people, the nations will not only bask in God's presence, they will also be engaged in God's purpose. Resources are shifted. Isaiah calls for more than some idealized hope in ending the existence of spears and swords, but for the creation of instruments of life. Plowshares and pruning hooks are for farming, the vocation of feeding hungry people. In this vision of Jewish salvation, not just its people, but the earth itself is transformed from a battleground into a fertile garden. Now, for Paul, this invitation to enter this threshold of faith begins with an observation about time. Paul insists that we wake up because salvation is nearer to us now than when we became believers. For Paul, salvation is not a possession. It's a sign of God's grace in motion. That is, in the process of coming closer now and in ongoing relationship with the divine and with one another. Now, we know grace is a free and unearned gift, and that's a good thing. But for Paul, salvation is bringing healing to the sick, food to the hungry, hope to the dispossessed, justice to the cast out. For Paul, salvation is deeply connected to altered behavior, since the way we live always reflects who and what we truly love. Service to God in God's world is in the offering of our bodies, as we say each week in our Eucharistic prayer, our whole person in loving service to God. In our gospel today, beyond some highly symbolic apocalyptic imagery that is the subject of another sermon, Jesus' message is clear. We must stay awake and keep our hearts always alert for the Spirit, always seeking to uplift, enlarge, and empower us beyond our current state. To be willing, in a sense, to be on the threshold of both waiting and seeking to experience the nativity of Christ, God's love within us, and then crucially, being willing to act upon it. To be a working part of Isaiah's vision of a healed and healing world. To step through the threshold of trust and experience the living and moving salvation Paul describes, helping God set right what is distorted and what is broken, Yes, to help God save the world. Now, as you know, I am not a huge fan of theological abstractions, so I have invited our good friend Quint to preach the gospel to us today. Now, before inviting him up, one word about Quint. Our mission in this church to seek God and be Christ's body in the world is fundamentally about transforming lives. Quint will testify to his own story. But what I want to say is that I have witnessed something extraordinary in Quint these past months, and especially as my partner in mission in Iraq. And that is the blossoming of a spirit. Now, Quint may not see it this way, but the reason I asked him to testify today is because he has lived what is for me the very spirit of Advent, a coming of Christ and new life born through the grace of God. So, Quint, please. Preach it, brother.
Thank you. Amen. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My story is this. I'd like to start out by saying that Advent is defined by dictionary.com, which you kind of put up there with wikipedia.com, as the coming into place, view, or being. Or put another way, it's an arrival. A month before Advent in the year 2014, so only about 2 short years ago, the only thing that I had arrived in my life was crisis. Let me say it again. In October 2014, I was in crisis on multiple fronts. First, I had a professional crisis. Growing anger at work at what I perceived were the failures of others, the failure to follow procedures resulting in more work, longer hours, and increased burnout consumed me with anger and frustration. I threw a clipboard. I yelled. It was all about the Benjamin. Eventually, my anger got the best of me. My manager called me into the first of what would be several meetings to discuss my anger issue. At the same time as I was melting down at work and doing everything I could to scupper a 27-year career, I found myself eyeball deep in a personal crisis, at least partially of my own making. In May of 2013, I had entered into a serious relationship with a woman in Florida. By October of 2014, the reality of the differences between us, not to mention the 1,200-mile distance, had put quite a strain on our relationship. The growing feeling of failure, the growing acrimony between us, and the realization that I wasn't getting any younger only deepened my anger and deepened my sense of crisis. As if that wasn't bad enough, and as if that was enough fuel for a full-on conflagration, a 10-alarm crisis, I became aware of the growing disaster befalling numerous faith and ethnic communities in the Middle East, especially in Iraq and Syria. I attended demonstrations in front of the White House, on the National Mall, and in Union Square in New York City to voice my opinion. But as the Middle East burned, I felt increasingly impotent. Every media report only added to the feeling of helplessness and impotence. It was like watching Rwanda all over again. Call it, for me, a crisis of conscience. And then, on a very personal level, my mother's declining health following her stroke in 2013, and my father's angel birthday on the 27th of November of 2014 made sure that Advent and the Christmas seasons were times to forget. No God, no faith, no church, nothing. The new year didn't promise anything better. In fact, I reached a professional low point in January of 2015. A meeting with my boss went something like this. Your career is in serious jeopardy. You have 2 choices. Either you seek a therapist regarding your anger management, or you seek new employment. I mean, that's rather stark. I earned that, but it's rather stark nonetheless. Rather than throw away 27 years of my professional life, I sought out a therapist. At the second attempt, I found a terrific counselor who listened, was patient, and who cared about me. By March 2015, my manager at DuPont told me that he was seeing personal development. He said that I would receive a cost of living raise on the occasion of my 28-year anniversary in May of that year if I continued to show professional and personal development. At the same time as my professional life improved, my personal life continued in crisis. By May of 2015, the relationship fires that had once burned were reduced to smoldering and then reduced to dying embers, and then they went out altogether. Thankfully, the steady hand of my therapist helped me through this period. One day, out of nowhere, my manager suggested that it could be beneficial to me professionally and personally if I spoke with a spiritual advisor. He said that he and his wife were seeing both a therapist and an advisor to work through marital issues and had found both the therapist and the spiritual advisor very meaningful and very beneficial. He suggested, I think, even to pray on it. A week off in early to mid-June of 2015 was spent thinking about whether I wanted to return to church. Return to church was my code phrase for seeking a spiritual advisor. On June the 12th, I came to the decision that yes, I would go back to church. It made sense to come here to St. Martin's. Father Chris officiated at my dad's funeral in 2012. The outreach for members of the St. Martin's family to my family, especially to my mom, after Dad passed away, helped make a terrible time better. My decision to walk away in 2012 had been my own. So in short, I couldn't think of any reason why I shouldn't come back. Another reason to return was the fact that the crisis in the Middle East, targeting religious and ethnic groups, including Christians, made me ponder whether just perhaps the Episcopal Church had some sort of effort underway that I could become a part of and thus aid in lessening the crisis I was feeling on the conscience front. When I entered St. Martin's on Sunday, June the 14th, 2015, I had no idea what to expect. Lo and behold, there was none of this, "Oh, where have you been?" or worse than that. Only handshakes, greetings, and members of the congregation, or I should say members of what I now know as my St. Martin's family, asking after Mom and my family. Dear friends such as Walt Albert, Helen Myers, Chuck Myers, Father Chris, Chris Delaney, Pam Faber, Gail Muir, and many, too many to name. It would take me probably another hour to name them all. Warmly welcomed me, which made my return a heck of a lot easier. During the service, I heard Father Chris and Pam speak of a St. Martin's outreach ministry called Stand with Iraqi Christians. I heard that a concert called I Rock for Iraq had taken place just the day before. I couldn't help but smile. Perhaps I was meant to be here. Imagine, I've been watching the Middle East meltdown on TV since October of 2014, feeling helpless, feeling like I was seeing Rwanda all over again, with people dying left and right, and whole communities being destroyed. And here were people only 15 minutes away from where I lived at St. Martin's who were actually doing something to make people's lives better. So I decided to keep coming back. The people, the atmosphere, the message of sermons, seek God where you can find Him in your life and seek to be Christ's body in the world, meant something to me as the Sundays and the days went by. And it also meant something to me that this was obviously a mission and is a mission-driven church. During that time period, I came to see Father Chris about what I could do to get more involved in the church, in my own faith, and also in Stand with Iraqi Christians. He suggested I come to several meetings. I expressed interest in going with Father Chris to Iraq. However, that would have to be backburnered because my boss, who had been such a good friend and ally and had never ever thrown me under the bus, had to undergo open heart surgery in September of 2015, and to leave would have thrown our office into absolute chaos. We had a small office to begin with. So work progressed okay in 2015, but on the 15th of December, I found out that the 25th of December, Christmas Day, would be my last day of work because a merger between DuPont and Dow Chemical resulted in my entire department becoming surplus to requirements. That's the bad news. The good news is I'm on a severance package, which which is very generous. The time that I've had since then, since I haven't gone back to work yet, has allowed me to get closer to my mom, allowed me to get closer to my sister in caring for my mom. It's also given me time to get closer to Stand With Iraqi Christians, to participate in screenings and of the film Where Is Our Place that Father Chris shot in 2015 on his mission. So inside now, I feel less stress. I'm not advancing professionally just yet, but I also don't have this kind of stressful job that my doctor hated with the rotating shift work hours for 20-odd years. He would always ask me, when are you going to leave that job? My health's improved. My sense of well-being has improved. During the summer, that chance to go on the mission trip to Iraq, summer 2016 that is, finally came around, and Father Chris and I decided that I would go with him on the trip to Erbil in October. So fast forward to October. I went to Iraq. Instead of me bringing something to our friends in Iraq, whatever I gave them was far, far less than what they gave to me. What I received was love, humanity, faith, friendship, and all these things for a lifetime and then some. Any differences in language or custom are superficial. Smiles, hugs, handshakes are universal signs of human love. I expected to deliver financial or physical aid, but what I received was a gift of the heart, of the soul, that transcends anything money can buy. About me, to be honest, I still have anger, but it's mostly about what I see in the world. I still feel uncertainty about what's next and professionally and what's next for me in my life. Uncertainty for my family is still there as Mom's health continues to decline. And unfortunately, the negativity and the discourse in this country is still there, and so it's just as off-putting as it ever was. Fortunately, I'm able to put energy in here in the St. Martin's and in Stand With Iraqi Christians, and it's been a real positive outlet, and I can't thank St. Martin's and Stand With Iraqi Christians enough for that. St. Martin's and my faith have become more important than ever. I'm scheduled to begin a process with a group of St. Martin's family. I would have called them parishioners, but actually they're family, so you can scratch parishioners and put family, as I prefer to call them, to better help me understand what God is doing with me next, what is in store for me. So I shall begin discernment process in December. I'm truly on the best threshold imaginable, and I can't wait to see what is on the other side. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Quint.
Thanks.
For those able, please stand. Let us say together the Apostles' Creed found on page 3 of your Bible. I believe in God, Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. I believe in Jesus Christ, his only Son, our Lord, who was conceived by the power of the Holy Spirit, and born of the Virgin Mary, who suffered on Pontius Pilate, was crucified, died, and buried. He descended to the dead. On the third day he rose again. He descended to heaven, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. He will come again to judge the living and the dead. And I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen.
Prayers of the people are under leaflet on page 3. Almighty and ever-present God, who made yourself manifest in the form of a helpless infant, we give you thanks for this holy season of Advent. Be present with us as we prepare to receive your coming amongst us.